Everyone knows, please make sure that you're using Google Chrome for your best audio experience. Kouroush is going to go through the presentation, The Rise of Generic Cities, Beauty is in the Eye of the Influencer. After half an hour, he will then be taking questions and answers. So I'm just going to hand over to Kouroush and let him start. Welcome, Kouroush.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. I'm delighted to be on this webcam with you. It's a strange feeling to be speaking to the screen. Like you, I'm normally used to being in a conference hall or a lecture hall rather than in my home studio. I'm not sure what you can see, so please bear with me. I don't know whether you can see me or my screen. Alexia, do you know what is visible?
We can see you and the presentation, and there is a Q&A box to the right. So if anyone has any questions, you can pop your questions in the Q&A box, and then we will answer them after the first half an hour.
Okay, so if I go full screen, hopefully the it just will be the presentation, correct?
Yes.
Right. That's just the presentation screen. Okay, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for attending. And I think Alexia said about half an hour, so I will bash on. I'm Kouroush Salehi. I'm an architect and an urbanist. And the subject today, as you know, once I can get the slide to move. Generic cities. As you sure appreciate that in less than a few decades, over three quarters of us will be living in cities. So how we curate our urban realm will have an impact on our well-being and how we go about our lives. I've discussed this subject on one or two other occasions before, and I think last time I called it the cut and paste syndrome. And I will explain why shortly. The term generic city, you may have heard before. It was first coined by the Dutch architect Rem Koolhaas. I think my screen is cropped for some reason or other. Seems like could be the aspect ratio. Can you help Alexia here? Alexia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How can I help?
I think my screen is slightly, the aspect ratio is a very odd dimension, so it's got a little bit of it is cropped.
It's okay. The audience can see it.
You can see it. Okay.
Yeah. It's just where yours is minimized in order to be able to see it from your side.
Sure. So the term the generic city was coined by Rem Koolhaas. Briefly, he says the fast pace of growth in global cities where the economic and commercial urgency often results in a characterless mimicry of an organic growth. Organic growth, as you appreciate, is how normally cities grow. Cities grow from being a small commune, perhaps becoming village, maybe few villages around, over time grow and join each other. Become a town, towns will have suburbs, etc. And that can happen over sometimes 100, sometimes 1,000 years. When you look at some of the cities in India, here in Middle East, or in Europe, they are over 1,000 years, and they've grown organically. Yet there are cities that are put together or centers of habitation, shall we call them, and that's what when it's it's more instantaneous. And that's generally done because of the ease of construction, but also through economic considerations. For this series, I wanted to bring in the role of the mass media. Now with the COVID-19, we're spending more time with social isolation, we're spending more time at home, but we also potentially are communicating to family and friends via a multitude of mediums. But there are those that commercially take advantage of this mass platform and promote a certain aspect of commerciality. Or commercial placements, product placements. The influence is a term I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Supposedly they are supposed to be have got their reputation through a knowledge or expertise or certain achievement. But the discussion for today's talk is how, by promoting a certain style globally, we are then numbed, or our senses are numbed to be accepting a certain norm or a certain style of existence, whether it's clothing or our appearances or our behavior, etc. So does the aesthetics of mass consumption guide our individual taste and sensibilities towards a homogeneous existence? So, I mean, there are algorithms which are defined, and we become conditioned by certain formulae. So much so that we'll find that people around the world are gravitating towards certain products, certain TV programs, dare I say, certain food, and accepting of certain aesthetics. In a sense that the cultural nuances are gradually being eroded. And just, if I may read from, so I can be more concise: generic consumption, generic desires, generic ambitions, and generic dreams. Rem Koolhaas, in his paper, argues or compares the modern city to an airport. In the days that we could travel, we weren't so socially isolated, I used to travel a lot with work, sometimes many times a week. In years gone, I remember I would travel for 12, 13 hours across from Europe to China to attend just one single meeting and then go back. So I'll be more in the air than I'll be actually on the ground. And in that sense, often, because of the frequency of my travel and the fact that the airports all look the same, sometimes I would land somewhere and I would look at my boarding pass to find out really which city I'm in. It's a sorry state of affair. Not that I'm particularly enjoying this home isolation, but nevertheless is quite telling. And this is an aspect that Rem tries to draw on. And he says it's a contemporary city like an airport, particularly or particularly they're all the same. There is lack of identity. There is a sameness about them that doesn't seem to indicate a past. And that uniformity, I would also argue, that doesn't indicate a future either. It's a static place. Despite the movement, it's almost timeless because there's absolutely no distinction. You may have arrived at an airport at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's no sense of time because there is activity, and it's uniform activity. And then there are the brands. The efficiency of an airport requires it to be very easily legible. That way, thousands upon thousands of people can go where they want to go without having to negotiate their way past a route. So that almost over clarity demands a somewhat brutal legibility. But layered with that, there are brands that are there that we are told will make things commercially viable. So this amazingly swanky airport with lots of lighting, lots of people to serve us, lots of people to clean it and keep it functional, pays for itself by then charging brands and bringing brands to have boutiques and outlets there. So in a way, you could say that the airport is the ultimate generic construct. It is identical and it's then instantly recognizable. But moreover, the brands that go to serve it, because they are brands, tend to be that repetitive, instantly recognizable component. This is a typical airport, could be anywhere in the world. The same fast food chains, same signage, legibility, and supposedly efficiency. But what of those cities? What makes a place? Urbanists often analyze and discuss good placemaking. What is placemaking and what is place characteristics that show us the enhanced version of ourselves. It is a unique, possibly the topography, the hills, the rivers, there are the streets, there are individual buildings, there are the memorable landmarks. Often these are the elements that gives the city its uniqueness, its character. But then there is the brands, there are the consumptions, there are the elements that make recognizability, which is what brand is ultimately about. It makes them be there and promote a certain status. So much so that ultimately it promotes sameness. A teenager in Beijing yearning for the same footwear as the one in Beirut or Baltimore. Same films, same games. The graphics on my screen are all muddled up. I hope yours are a little bit better. So this is the syndrome that I was referring to, where the signage, if you like, or the brands become the landmarks of a city. And there are so many cities in the world that people say, you know, by the big plastic, I don't know, McDonald's over there, I'll meet you under the sign. It's not a tree. Or I see you at the clock tower. I'll see you at top of the hill. I'll see you by the McDonald's sign. I'm not singling out McDonald's. This is KFC. So if the generic city syndrome, when it was first proposed or discussed in the early mid-90s, I think there is another component that has come to play, and that's the social media. These are the platforms that share our vision, share our most inner thoughts. The boundaries of privacy have been blurred. Stuff that people a few years ago wouldn't tell their sibling or their own family, nowadays they are more than happy to display on the World Wide Web for all to see. There seems to be a shift in our standards. There seems to be a shift to a level that we all curate our own existences. We become celebrities of our own culture. In that sense, in that soap opera, we become the stars, and we write our own scenarios. What was it somebody said recently? Take a selfie, fake a life. I don't want to be cynical to saying everybody who takes a selfie is faking a life, but nevertheless, there is a point there to be made. And what happens that those, let's say, those who have more influencers, or those who have a larger share of the platform would promote a certain standard, a certain state of being. This fashion is better than that fashion. This way of lifestyle is better. If you're, I don't know, fit and spend hours in the gym, you are somehow perceived as a more successful being. So those subtle hints, sometimes not so subtle, are being promoted globally and are being accepted globally. So that the common grounds promotes common imagery, common sensibility, common taste. So together with branding, the product branding and these social medias, that we see that the sameness has been promoted very aggressively. Maybe it's just unintentionally, but whatever it is a byproduct of the state that we find ourselves. Actually, this is a city. This is Hong Kong, and this street. I know this street very well because LWK, our head office in Hong Kong, it's one of these very nice, very beautiful streets of Hong Kong, and our head office is there. So I've walked that street many a times. But what is very instantly recognizable about the street, it's a destination for people to come and see major global brands. So the landmark aspect, so you just imagine the wonderfully beautiful city of Hong Kong with its unique topography, being on the edge of the peninsula with a wonderful nature. All of a sudden, the big fluorescent neon strip lighting giant billboards become more recognizable, more of a destination than much more. This is, I'm sure you know it, Piccadilly Circus, London, place I grew up. London with all its history, all its wonderful contribution he has made to the sciences, to the arts. Often in movies, when they want to say, oh, we've been to London, if it's not Big Ben, it's Piccadilly Circus. And they show this at night with fluorescence. And they're all brands, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Sanya, Foster, etc. So in a way, the city becomes recognizable or represented by its temples of consumption, as I call them, where our collective desire to belong is fed on the menu of KFC and flat pack cultural icons. By flat pack, I mean anything, any iconography that can be packaged up and sent to anywhere in the world, whether it's you send them virtually, digitally, however. But it's about a representation or a framework, a two-dimensional representation of our existence. So the cut and paste cities, which are growing around the world, could be sort of a result of that global monoculture. And if there was one word that I would like to summarize my talk today, is that monoculture. The way buildings are extruded through a singular plan into towers, which are extremely repetitive. And then people of all sorts of nuanced characters and background become and live in these cardboard extrusions. Another example of extruded singular plan, multiplied thousands of times to its repeated self. So the cut and paste syndrome, and how we can address it, and how we can address the diversity that we all feel, and about our own urban complexity. What are our differences? Our individual characteristics? What of our cultures, our backgrounds? Does our identity, which is often rooted in thousands layers of evolution, have a role at all? And by identity, I mean that which, at least for now, represents us as individual beings. So is unique or individual lost? Totally. So through these cookie cutter cities, cookie cutter sensibilities, cookie cutter copying of celebrity culture, are we just promoting monoculture, promoting standardization? And another word, peculiar word, I think I thought of it myself, but if you heard it elsewhere, maybe I stole it from someone else. But I call this monofunctionalism. So how we function in the same way. I don't know how much time we've got, but we're nearing the end. So the result in uniform imagery, uniform sensibilities, and uniform taste, and subsequent erosion of difference and our distinctness. Could climatic, economic, and cultural nuances be given a significant role before mass-produced tower blocks, prefabricated molds, and pre-packed lifestyles engulf us and take us over? I don't want this to be a cynical chat, but hopefully there's been some thought-provoking and thoughts generating words said there. So please, I'll be delighted to hear from you if you have any comments once I know how to get out of this screen.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box that we have. I'll start off with a question actually. Do you think the rise of prefab and modular buildings will obviously also have an effect on this, because I know that prefab and modular are now becoming a lot more useful in terms of construction, just because of the ease and cost. Do you think that will obviously have an effect on how cities are planned? Hello, can you hear me?
Sorry, are you talking to me?
Yes, sorry, I was just starting.
So sorry, no, I thought you were talking to the audience, because I'm reading some very nice comments. The people, I'm not used to this platform, by the way. It looks wonderfully interactive, and some amazing comments already been put. Sorry, what was that, Alexia?
I was just wondering, obviously you've talked about how everything is sort of moving towards a uniform and kind of just being for more rather than ease and function rather than how it looks or fits in with the culture. Do you think that rise of prefab and modular will obviously have an impact on this? Because I know within construction, a lot of people are now opting for those avenues purely because of how easy and how cheap it is to use them.
Look, there are many sort of components. I like to really just sort of take a much higher look at this. Prefab or modular design or elements that help house people in a cheaper way, they are perfectly legit and they should be there, and we got nothing against them. But I think that's sort of focusing on the minutiae, whilst the greater picture, and that is what we're doing to ourselves by accepting and consuming that vacuous broth that we've been fed as celebrity culture or whatever else. And I think the way that we could be sort of blindly walking into something which to me is it has its advantages. Of course it does. Here I am, sitting in my art studio, talking to you across various cities and towns, hopefully in the region, etc. So there are advantages, but the disadvantages are some I've just mentioned. In a sense that, and I'm genuinely alarmed. This is not just the subject of a talk that I'm giving this today. I'm genuinely alarmed when I go to Cairo, where I work, and I see two sort of Egyptian kids talking in Arabic, and then they burst into half English and half with American accent, and that they've got from some show, and then I think that or not just here, but same in Hong Kong, in China. And that I'm alarmed by that, because if there is a superior culture that promotes in one aspect of life, let's say the culture that produces Netflix, it fundamentally producing or showing us one aspect of ourselves, then what of the rest of the world? It's promoting something that is extremely narrow, and I would say totally non-representative on a global scale.
So we've had a few questions come in. The first question is, what negative impact will the cut and paste syndrome have in perception of creativity?
Great question. Who's that from?
That's from Mohammed Arif Hassar.
So if I heard you correctly, what negative impact does cut and paste culture have on our individual creativity? Well, that is my concern. It is my concern. I'm really alarmed. You probably seen from my background, because I'm sitting in my art studio, that I'm a painter, and in fact I was a painter before I was an architect, and I still practice both. I'm alarmed by young artists, that what I call them, they're Instagram artists. They either refer to their own sort of research by just looking at other artists and then create versions of that. And in a way that in popular culture that there are influences. You could find them in the arts worlds. All it takes for a certain cool, hip image to be promoted as sellable or likable or having the cool factor. And before you know it, like there are 500 young artists around the globe posting stuff which is very similar to that thing. And with the arts, I mean, the legitimacy of the artist is its differentness, it's otherness, its refusal to wanting to join the mainstream. And when they refer to Instagram as their points of research, and refer to it by all means, but when it becomes that cut and paste syndrome, then I find that alarming.
Next question is from Abdulrahman Al-Bathar. He said, if you were to be given a large lot of land in a suburb, perhaps, what would be your approach to avoid monoculture and create uniqueness without sacrificing functionality?
That's a fantastic question. Oh, God. Yeah, as an architect, I often ask myself, what would it be? I don't know. I don't believe, look, there is absolutely nothing wrong with an art or architecture that is representative or it sort of blends in and it's contextual. I have another series of lectures where I criticize what is called iconoclastism, which is, again, when I first came to this region, particularly in Dubai, everybody wanted an iconic building. It was so much so that the practice I worked for, I banned the use of the word icon, because every young architect wanted to build the next Burj Al Arab or Burj Khalifa. Everybody wanted to be an icon. And the idea was that if everything is iconic, then nothing is iconic. Architecture and city making is about a composition. It's like a symphony. There are hundreds of instruments, but they play in harmony, in respect of each other, not despite each other. They don't compete with each other. So there is an architecture or an art form that is in harmony with its context. So I'm not saying that we should be different for the sake of being different. But, you know, there are times that just blending in is the best solution.
The next question comes from Priscilla Joseph. She said, why are more and more cities moving towards monoculture?
I think part of it is what I just mentioned, that a lot of our sensibilities are becoming the same. I've been practicing as an architect and urbanist for coming to 25, 30 years globally. And I remember first time I went to Asia, I was really disheartened where clients would show me something I don't know that they've seen in a trade mag, and it could be, I don't know, from Los Angeles or something they've seen in London, and they wanted a replicate of that, sometimes in the middle of a Chinese countryside. And I think that's part of an inevitable part of globalization, that we have access to imagery, and those imageries sort of sometimes speak to us better than other alternatives. So there are elements of accepting a global culture in a global world. It's fine and it's natural, and I don't think we should fight it. But there are elements, especially at a higher plane, those who commission cities, city mayors, city fathers, certainly urbanists, architects, developers. I think they can be a little bit more sensitive to what is unique about their development, what is unique about their city, and not necessarily just go down the most commercially viable, the fastest way to get to the bottom line and raise profit, which often is the biggest reason for cookie cutting design.
The next question comes from Nassim. He said, thanks for the interesting presentation. As we all know, copying, or I may say mimicism, is a way of learning and growing. However, identity is a crucial issue when talking about city planning. Based on that, and from your point of view, how to define that fine line between mimicism and identity preservation of a city?
I think I explained that. I'm happy to have another discussion. Actually, sometimes I have offline discussion with people just contact and want to chat about something, so that would be okay too. I'm not sure what mimicism is. I can guess. It's the cookie cutter syndrome that I was just saying. Let's distinguish between planning and urban design. Planning is the legal, or if you like, the framework of realizing a city, where the urban design is the spaces between buildings that give us character and give our public grounds a context to which then architecture can emerge, or a lifestyle, or public engagements can take place. And I think once we actually, if we're talking about an urban design approach to creating places, city places, public places, there are many mechanisms that we can use and employ that don't necessarily go, they're not to do with representations of form or architecture. So therefore, it cannot be mimicked. If it's activity-based, for instance, if it's a public realm, it's about sort of creating destination that relates to the genius loci, it relates back specifically to the society that it's addressing, to the city that it's addressing. Then I think it weakens this idea of cut and paste. It's a big subject. I don't think we're going to cover it in a quick seminar, but thanks for asking the question.
Mahesh asks, as per your analysis, which will be the first region to adopt these kinds of concepts?
Sorry, what Mahesh says, which region?
He says, as per your analysis, which will be the first, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, as per your analysis, which will be the first region to adopt these kind of concepts?
The first region that
to adopt these kinds of concepts, so to move away from the monoculture style?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. First, I haven't been to all regions of the world, so I don't know what everybody's doing. But the ones that I've been to, there are conscious efforts being made. People are I would say urbanism is in a much better place than it was, let's say in 30 years ago. I would say the fact that there is a subject called urbanism, i.e., 30 years ago there wasn't a university course called urban design. There was architecture and there was planning, but there's no urban design because somehow people felt that it wasn't needed or it was being covered, but it wasn't being covered. So now that there are discussions and there are forums and there are courses and there is a debate that says cities have a life of their own and they need to be considered, and that there is a more layered discussion to be had once realizing either a museum or a bridge. I just come off, by the way, a client presentation in Jeddah where we're trying to do a bridge. And the discussion that we're having is not simply about going from A to B. The discussion we're having, because it's vehicular and pedestrian bridge, is why would the pedestrian want to go on top of that bridge? because cars and people don't like to be next to each other. So then we try to create sort of nodes that will work as destination, that people would like to go and participate in activities, etc. And then the bridge becomes a backdrop, and then the bridge is woven into the grain of the city and the human scale. So when you look at that level of discussion that is taking place, and it's taking place here in Middle East, there's not a lot of praises for Middle East. We're having some of the most wonderful discussions about city design here in Middle East. Saudi is embracing. I mean, Dubai's been embracing. Abu Dhabi was at the forefront 30 years ago of trying to have a planning and urban design system. Doha is doing the same. So there's a lot of discussion is taking place here and globally, which I think is extremely optimistic.
Next question comes from Jeff. He said, what impact does it have on pollution and the environment at large for these cities?
Well, I tell you, the best impact on the pollution has been this working from home. I live somewhere near a motorway, and I go out onto my little garden, and for the first time I can hear birds and not the motorway. So the best environmental impact seems to have been working from home. But there are many aspects of the environment that also suffer because of globalization, and I think we can really feel it now. The fact that we're not flying around I mean, normally I would come to Riyadh or Jeddah or Cairo, wherever else, Beijing, or wherever I will go and give these talks. But now I'm sitting here in my studio and giving this talk. That means I'm not flying. Therefore, my carbon footprint is reduced. So the globalization, of course, has had a huge impact on the environment. I think there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a lesson learned. We all need to participate in that quite consciously.
Ramadan asks how to use artificial intelligence in the rise of generic cities.
Well, I don't want to use generic cities, give them rights. So I don't want to use anything. I think if I understand the question correctly, is how artificial intelligence can stop the rise of generic cities. I tell you the truth, I don't have an answer for that. There's a lot to be said for artificial intelligence, but there is a lot of, like we just said, there's a lot of ways of using technology intelligently. Again, I repeat, the fact that we're talking to each other, from the comfort of our own homes and sofas and so on, is a huge plus. But the fact that there will be thousands upon thousands of us who will go on social media and look at the same things and maybe draw pretty much the same conclusions and all of that, and losing our personal perspective, I don't think that's very cool at all.
Faith asks, hi Kouroush, how would you advise urban planners, architects and developers to build within emerging cities, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa?
Wow. Yeah, amazing. I've done one project many years ago in Sub-Saharan Africa, and I know how challenging it is, because you almost have to reevaluate quite a lot of assumptions that we make in more advanced economies. Sub-Saharan Africa, look, it's a big subject. There are many aspects of designing sustainable design, contextual design, designing with available materials, designing with materials that are available and skills that are available locally. This discussion, believe it or not, is as old. You might know the wonderful Egyptian thinker early 20th century called Hassan Fathi. And I remember as a young, very, very young student reading his book, where he was arguing about sustainable architecture, which I think that he didn't even use the word sustainable. I don't think there was such a word. But in a way that he was promoting building to the knowledge, to the available material, expertise and cultural requirements of a region, about 100 years ago. So it's a big subject, it's a fascinating subject, and it deserves a seminar. Maybe I should do a next seminar on Sub-Saharan design and how to engage with it. Thanks for the question. Is anybody there?
I think that may be all of our questions now. If anyone has got any final questions that they'd like to say to Kouroush, now is your time. If not, I think we can leave it there. I think we've made very good time here. And obviously we always make sure that this recording will be provided to all attendees afterwards. And we will share the presentation with you as well in the format of a PDF. Faith has actually mentioned saying, yes, please do a webinar on Sub-Saharan design. So we can always look to facilitate that in the future as well.
That's a great idea. I will definitely do a paper on it in the next few months.
Omar's just mentioned that he sent a question. Omar, could you please put your question in again? Because I can't seem to find it in our list. Sorry, I'm just trying to see. Unfortunately, I don't think his question is showing. Just to remind everyone, this will be shared with you post-webinar. We will get the recording to you within the next 2 to 3 days. That will be emailed straight around to you with a copy of the presentation. Thank you so much, Kouroush,